Today I'm going to talk about how I take time-lapse with my Mavic 2 zoom, and recently I've been taking a lot of hyperlapse footage from my flight, and I'm also trying out day to night time-lapse. And because the amount of sunlight is going to change drastically during this time of the day, there's going to be much more time and effort for post-processing. I will also be showing you my editing workflow, and this is the side-by-side comparison. On the left is the default video generated by the DJI drone, and on the right is the post-process video using a series of software, which is the Adobe Lightroom, LRTimelapse, and Premiere Pro. So each of these steps is going to be very important, so do follow the video closely. And if you find this video useful, please give a thumbs up and consider subscribing to this channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. So before starting to fly the drone, you may want to do a quick check on the camera settings. You'll want to make sure that the Save Original Hyperlapse option is turned on, and you have selected to save in the RAW format. This is going to be important because using the RAW picture files for post-processing is going to give you much better quality, as I'll be showing you later. And the other important setting is to ensure that you are saving your SD card and that you have enough capacity inside. So once this is done, you are all good to take off. So in the hyperlapse, the amount of time the drone has in the air is going to be very precious. So the best way to fly the drone is to go to the endpoint where the hyperlapse is going to end. And so now I'm going to fly the drone to somewhere near the bridge, and this is where I want the hyperlapse to end. And now we are going to turn on the hyperlapse mode by simply clicking on this icon over here. We will then be asked to select one of the hyperlapse mode. So for this footage, I'm going to choose waypoint. And before I proceed, the camera seems to be getting too dark, so let's set that correctly first. At ISO 100, I will need to reduce the shutter speed significantly. And because the sky is getting dark really fast, I think it will be a better idea to raise the ISO up to 200. And for the shutter speed, I'll try to adjust it accordingly to make the exposure value slightly above 0. So in this case, it seems like 1/6.25 seconds seems like a good shutter speed to start with for now. And once this is done, I will add this point into the hyperlapse position, and I'll fly the drone backwards towards where I want my starting point to be. So now I'm going to speed this up, and once we are at the final location that we want, we'll just press the Add Position button. At this point, you want to ensure that the reverse option is activated so that the drone will essentially start from the current location back to where we came from just now. Once we hit the next arrow, we will then select the frame duration. For this hyperlapse, I'll choose 3 seconds, which essentially means that the drone will take a shot every 3 seconds. So next, let's select the video length that you want. I want to stretch it as far as I can, so let's go for 15 seconds. For this, the drone is going to take about 19 minutes to complete the hyperlapse. And looking at the battery indicator, I have about 21 minutes of flight time, so I'll still need to fly the drone back to where I am. And this is certainly too close for comfort. But it's okay for now. We'll just have to closely monitor the battery status, and in the meanwhile, we can let the drone do its work. So at this point, the drone will fly along the straight path and have a shot taken every 3 seconds. The amount of light is going to change very fast, so along the way I'm going to change or increase the shutter speed when I find the image getting too dark. Otherwise, the camera is not going to have enough lights going in, and it's going to be too hard to recover this in post. At this point, you see that the image is getting dark, so I'll ramp up the shutter speed to 1/2.5 of a second while leaving the ISO setting and the aperture constant. The ISO setting changes the sensitivity of the sensor, so while it is possible to bring up the ISO to make the image brighter, having a higher ISO may introduce noise to the footage, so I'll keep the ISO at a low value and to use the shutter speed to compensate for it. At the same time, having a higher shutter speed introduces motion blur, which adds to the overall effect of the hyperlapse. So the hyperlapse is going to take another 4 minutes, but I only have about 6 minutes of battery left. I wouldn't want to risk having the drone land on water, so I'll stop the hyperlapse and have it return to home. So before I start the post-processing, let us take a look at the Hyperlapse video generated from the DJI Mavic 2 Zoom. So this video quality is actually not too bad, but there are a few issues. Number one, this is in 1080p. The image quality will not be as good as you want it to be. And number two, because this is in standard format, so in terms of color grading, you won't be able to bring out as much color as you would take for a raw file. And number three, you notice that they are flickering due to the changes in aperture speed as I was shooting from the day and night time lapse. So to overcome this flickering effect, the first software you're going to need is the popular LRTimelapse. I'll leave a link in the description below, so it will bring you to this page where you can download the basic version. And if you have evaluated the software and want to buy the pro version, I'll recommend you to do so. It's a fantastic software for processing time-lapse video. And once you have installed the LRTimelapse, you will see this interface. On the left is where you will retrieve the directory where your raw files are stored. I'll navigate to the SG Hyperlapse RAW folder where I store the files that I've extracted from the SD card. So once these files are loaded, you'll see on the right hand side the properties of all the files. You'll notice that the aperture speed that I've changed during the flight are all captured here. I will also play back the video to see how it looks like. And so this gives a very quick overview of how your video will look like when it's converted into a video clip. And you can see the blue line that shows the changes in luminance of the clip, and it accurately captures the portion where I have changed the aperture speed. And on the top right hand corner is the whole workflow using LRTimelapse. It's actually quite intuitive, so let's go through these steps one by one. First, we'll click on the keyframe wizard to select the keyframes that we want to change and then set as reference points. So typically, if the light do not change that much, you just need about 2 to 3 keyframes. But in this case, I will select about 6 keyframes. And next, I'll go on to select the region where the color would, or the amount of light would change significantly. And you'll see that correspondingly, the blue lines would change accordingly. Right, so with that, we'll go on to the Holy Grail wizard. So this Holy Grail wizard essentially tries to compensate for the changes in the luminance. So with that, you just have to move the 2 sliders to make this yellow zigzag line fit as close as possible to this straight line over here. So after playing around with the sliders, I think we are good for now. So then we'll go on to save the settings that we have applied on our time-lapse. We'll then move on to the next button, which is essentially to drag the files into Lightroom for further processing. So now I'm just going to press, hold and drag this icon into the Lightroom Classic version that I have already installed on my computer. And once we are inside Lightroom, be sure that the add icon at the top right hand corner is activated, and we can then export this into the Lightroom. So this will take a while and we'll just wait for it. So remember that previously in LRTimelapse we have selected the 6 keyframes. So at this stage we are only interested to color grade the 6 keyframes that we have selected. So we'll go on to the filter option and select LRTS keyframes. And then this will filter and show the 6 keyframes that we are actually denoted with 4 stars. And now I'll go on to the develop module to do some color grading. So to do the color grading, first off, I'll change to auto settings and then I'll edit from there. First, we'll look at the color temperature, and you can adjust this to the right to give a more warmer feel. And if you want it to have auto white balance, you can select the eyedropper icon and then choose a white area. So this white balance and color temperature looks good. So I'll prefer it to be a bit warmer, so I'll move the sliders to the right a bit. So once this is done, I'll increase the exposure a bit to 0.2. So currently the white areas are pretty bright, so I'll bring down the highlights, shadows by a bit, as well as the white. So I'll bring this down, and yeah, I think this is good. And for the blacks, I'll just bring it slightly lower to bring out more contrast in the picture. and I think we're good for now. We'll leave this the same. We'll increase the vibrancy as well as the saturation by a bit. And now we'll move on to the tone curve. We'll move the brighter areas higher and the darker areas darker a bit. So this really brings out a lot of contrast in the picture, and it currently looks good. So you can see that with the raw file we can make a lot of drastic changes to bring out more colors in the file. So for the hue settings, I'll just bring up more colors in each of these color range that we see in the picture. So now we can see the colors really popping up in the overall picture, and I think it looks good for now. We'll look at sharpening. I think we'll leave the rest as it is. As for the noise, we'll do a bit of noise reduction. The image is getting a bit dark, so let's reduce the noise a bit, bring up the contrast, and for the lens correction I'll leave it. And I think we are good for now. The picture looks good. So next we are just going to copy the settings that we have applied, and I think we'll just choose everything, copy, and paste it over to the next picture that we see. And so now for the second keyframe, we will want to show the gradual decrease in the amount of light as we film the time lapse. So I'll just reduce the exposure by about 0.5 to 0.15, and I'll leave the other settings intact. So similarly, I'll copy and paste it to the next keyframe. So we are done with the first two keyframes, and for the remaining keyframes, we are just going to copy and paste the settings from one after another. So I'll just fast forward the remaining steps. And so once we are happy with color grading all the 6 keyframes, we'll click Ctrl O to select all the keyframes, and then we'll save the metadata into the file. So you can also click Ctrl S or Command S in your Mac. And once this is done, we are ready to swing back to LRTimelapse for the remaining of the workflow. So let's go back to the file that we have, and once these are loaded, we are done with the top row. So we'll move on to the second row. After you click the reload button, the LRTimelapse is going to load the settings that we have applied on the 6 keyframes that we have. Now if you look at the 6 keyframe, you'll notice that the properties of the color grading has been already applied on the LRTimelapse. The next step is to get LRTimelapse to help us apply a gradual change from one frame to another. So to do this, we'll actually just go on to press auto transition, and you'll notice that the settings are auto applied so that the change is gradual from one frame to another. So let's do a visual preview to see how this looks like in a video form. LRTimelapse is going to take some time to generate the visual previews, and at the same time apply gradual change to the color grading that we have done to the keyframe. So let's see how this looks like. So at this stage, you'll notice that the video has improved. The color grading has been applied, and there's a gradual change from day to night. However, there are still some flicker that we will need to address subsequently. And to fix this, let's go to the visual deflicker and bring some smoothing to the bring the pink luminous line closer to the green line that we are trying to achieve. So once this is done, the LRTimelapse will auto generate the frames again to make the transition more smooth as we move from frame to frame. So let's see how the final result looks like. So we just have to wait for the rendering to be completed before we run the preview one more time to see whether we have reduced the flickering effect as much as we can. So looking at this video, LRTimelapse has really done a good job to reduce the flickering effect, and you can actually run the visual preview and the deflicker multiple times to improve it along the way. So once you are satisfied, we can actually move on to the next step. And if we bounce over the render video, we'll see a pop-up to ask us to read metadata in Lightroom. So let's move on to Lightroom. First, we are going to deselect the filtering option that we have applied so far. Let's click on one file and then select all by clicking Command A or Control A in Windows. So we'll read the metadata that we have already applied in LRTimelapse, and this will apply the color grading and the gradual changes that we have set in LRTimelapse into Lightroom. So Lightroom will actually take some time to apply each of the settings into the frames, and once it is done, we can click on the export function, and over here we can actually select the location directory where we want to store the processed folder. I'll actually choose SG Timelapse Export as my target directory that I want to store the process folder, and once this is done, Lightroom will export this into the folder. We are now down to the final stage. Let's swing over to LRTimelapse where we will generate the video from the software. With this, we'll go to File, Render Video. So this is where we will select the directory where the Lightroom has already exported to. Let's take a look at how this folder look like. Yeah, these are all the process folder that we have color graded back in Lightroom, and we'll select the output folder as well as the output resolution. So for now, we'll just choose 1080p. If you are getting the Pro option, of course there are other higher resolution that's possible. So another option is to force the output to 16:9. So we can also shift the where we want the composition to be, so this area looks good. And LRTimelapse also allow you to choose other options like motion blur, sharpening the video, or timestamping the overlay. We will just leave this as it is, and for now we are ready to render the video. At this point, LRTimelapse will take some time to render the video into a from the timelapse into a video format. So let us wait for it to complete, and we'll take a look at how the video output looks like. So looking at this video output, the video quality looks really fantastic, very nice color and a nice transition from day to night. However, there's just one minor flaw that we still need to fix, which is the shaky footage. So to fix this, we'll need to go to Premiere Pro to put in some smoothening to the video. So let's go on to Premiere Pro, and from here we'll open up and import in the files that we have processed from Lightroom. So we'll just go to import and go to the folder where the process footage are. So this is the one, SG Timelapse Export, and we will import in the video, clicking in the first image as well as making sure the image sequence is selected. So with this, the timelapse video is actually copied into Premiere Pro, and we'll drag this to the timeline. And to smoothen this video, we are going to go to the editing tab, and we'll choose the warp stabilizer. So we'll type on warp, and we can find the warp stabilizer under distort. So we'll drag this into the timeline, and Premiere Pro will take some time to process this video. We'll just wait for it, and let's fast forward and see how the final video looks like. Well, the warp stabilizer took a couple of minutes to process, and now let's look at the video preview. It looks perfect. We have reduced the various flaws, reduced the flickers, and it's a very smooth image that we see here. So once this is done, we are happy with it. We are able to export this video into our hard disk. So with this, I've come to the end of the video. If you like the video and you find it useful, please feel free to like and subscribe this channel. And if you have any comments or questions regarding this editing workflow, please feel free to leave it in the comment section. I'll try as much as possible to reply them as soon as possible. And before the video ends, let's stay tuned to enjoy the final product that we have processed after all these steps.